If I were to tell you to name the weakest character in fiction or the weakest verse in fiction, who would you think of out of the ones that are actually compared in versus discussions? A big thought that might come to you is actually Homelander and Skibidi Toilet, as both of them are actively some of, if not the most slandered verses of all time. There's actually whole TikTok accounts dedicated to see who can Homelander even beat, and the answer is very little people that are actually relevant. So, who would win if we were to place some of the weakest verses in fiction together? If we faced Homelander from The Boys against the armies of Skibidi Toilet. So, while most of these characters are not remotely powerful in any relevant character discussion, for them they're actually somewhat, in the tiers of power they're actually quite impressive. And maybe even a little more impressive or unimpressive than you might think. They couldn't even destroy an island, but where would they actually scale? And who is the superior one of the two? Let's start off with Homelander. This is a character I've covered many times on the channel, so we're just gonna jump right into it. For a baseline, he should range from those city block to multi-city block ranges of power, often not only Soldier Boy's explosion, something he's obviously superior to, as Maeve takes the explosion, only being weakened via the fact that it takes her powers, and Homelander is generally superior to Soldier Boy, and is flat out is just the stronger of the two. As well as seeing the younger, weaker Homelander have the infamous chemical plant explosion feat, getting into that same tier of power. But this is not where Homelander caps at, and considering this is either from A, lesser characters than him, and B, when it's a much younger and weaker Homelander, then it makes a lot of sense that this isn't really his cap, like most people think it is. Not only do even random superheroes in the canon episodes of the tie-in show Boys Diabolical create large town level storms, and since Homelander is verbatim the strongest hero in the verse, he should upscale. He obviously also has those infamous city statements. He states this himself, he could wipe the city off the entire map. Guidebook backed this up. It's stated several times, either he can take nukes, or is implied he could take nukes, or weapons of only higher caliber can kill even weaker characters than him, or at least that is what is debated between the characters in the show. That is the narrative they're trying to present, with the atom bomb statement, and the statements that no weapon in the world can kill him. It wouldn't necessarily be inconsistent to say he's just a flat-out city-level character. Not only is even random heroes large town level, who once again to Homelander should just be stronger than by an insane amount. Even before he gets stronger on in later seasons, he has too much of these city-level statements, especially from the perspective of a lot of them being from more objective sources, such as guidebooks. Then it would be quite hard to deny he is actually a city-level threat, all things considered, and he would have the attack potency comparable of the energy needed to destroy a city. However, let's go over some downscaling, since people do like to bring that up. Something I've seen to commonly downscale Homelander is the fact that Maeve can harm him, which, ignoring everything else, just means Queen Maeve scales to Homelander. But people bring up how, Homelander was harmed by a metal pipe in his ear. Oh, she broke her arm from holding a bus. So let's delve right into the context. So not only did Homelander just not want to fight Maeve initially, and was probably holding back, and even when he started to try, he just beats the shit out of Maeve with ease. This is a Maeve far superior to any earlier Maeve, considering we knew that Maeve had been training for years, secretly building up her strength, specifically to fight Homelander one day. So it's hard to compare something she did in the far past to something she does literally seasons and years later. It's that simple, and the pipe thing is literally as simple as just simple. It's because Maeve is doing it. No normal human could do that to Homelander or something. It doesn't mean he's meta level. It just means Maeve has the force to harm a likely holding back Homelander a little bit. Doesn't matter if she does it with a weapon or not, the weapon would still need enough force to penetrate his skin from the wielder. In the same way, even if I just tap the extremely sharp knife against my hand, it won't do anything. Doesn't make me immune to knives, in the same way that a lot of characters who use basic guns and knives aren't gun and knife level. They're just simply a lot stronger than that. With speed easily for Homelander getting hit through supersonic at least, he flew at supersonic speeds when he was a child.
You know, when I was his age, I was breaking the sound barrier.
And can casually do it in the series. So, once again, this is a baseline. With Hypersonic plus 2 high hypersonic stuff, off of the fact he can outrun Butcher's explosion in the infamous speed feat of his, which is a Hypersonic plus speed feat, and the fact he can go to space, did it by himself, which in this specific instance, there's no reason to doubt him, meaning he has to be reaching escape velocity or about 25,000 miles per hour, a high hypersonic feat. Now, let's move on to Skibidi. For this, we're going to be mainly talking about the high tiers of the verse, so like the Titans, the Mothership, so on. Most of the lower tiers, and like fodder in the verse, are quite literally cannon fodder and have no real scaling above wall level, unironically. So they would just be butchered by Homelander, who is obviously not a wall level character. But for their consistent scaling, they have a lot of building to city blockers of power, and this is generally where they're more consistently portrayed at. Not only things from like GPE, the explosions produced by the characters and created by these characters constantly. Though it should also be noted these explosions often harm these characters, even the higher tier ones. Like these top tier ones do get affected by these building to city block explosions and attacks. And sometimes explosions actually can't destroy the buildings. And a lot of the times the explosion doesn't really do anything to the surrounding area, which can be attributed to the fact that it's a Gmod animation, but still we do have to take it in the literal narrative sense that these explosions just aren't as strong. For debatable higher ends, there are town level calcs for some of the characters, specifically GPE, when they move quite fast. This is not only inconsistent due to the fact that the calcs are quite iffy, assuming the materials made for these likely made of fictional metal that some of these come from like outer space. So I think it would be quite hard to argue that like a lot of these guys are made from or have the same properties as a real life metals, when a more easier interpretation is you just say it's a random fictitious metal that we don't know the properties of. Though this would be where they really cap at the town level ranges, even for the top tiers. And once again, even these town level attack calcs that are quite questionable are things that harm the characters quite significantly. So even if you want to say that town level, this is where they would flat out cap at least in their durability. However, there is two infamous arguments that you can mention. One of these characters are just city busters, which is pretty simple. We're just going to get the simple one out of the way. They're really not. We know they destroy cities over time. However, the fact is we don't know the time frame of this, and we don't know if they're obviously not doing it in one attack, and especially they're not doing it on their own for that matter. So this would probably just add more consistency to those building to city block ranges of power more than anything, considering they're taking large amounts of time to do this and doing it with several attacks. And for the higher feat that a lot of people are going to mention is the mountain busting feat that's done by the Mothership of the verse. But just like the others, I do have a lot of contention with this. Not only is the beam visually far away from the mountain, we quite literally see the ship move away from the mountain, and the context is that it's drilling into the ground, and the only thing we ever see destroyed is the ground. Nothing shows or says the mountain was destroyed. And even if this would only be for the attack potency of the verse regardless, as the fact that nothing shows this massive laser. That, by the way, the calc ignores the fact it takes like 15 seconds to charge and 5 seconds to actually destroy the environment, and just shows it's done instantly, which I think any character, especially a hypersonic character, would just react to regardless. If it was even mountain level, like there's one attack that takes 15 seconds to charge up is mountain level, it would practically be irrelevant. So for most cases, these characters cap at the city block ranges of power, with the town level being a more high end, while the city block is the more conservative and consistent end for these characters' attack potency and durability. For speed, they cap at those sub the supersonic rangers. They can move faster than perception a lot. Some characters can punch at this speed. There are some calcs that get higher, but these calcs just flat out lie. Not only trying to use the argument that the lasers in the verse that are never stated or proven to be actual lasers, and in fact don't act like lasers, which is shown by the fact they explode on contact with objects, which is something lasers do not do, making this fictional laser not having the speed of light properties that a lot of people assume it has, which would be quite hard to argue. And a lot of calcs also just acting like basic perception blitzing for some reason is higher than subsonic, which in this context, no, it's not like they're blitzing a higher speed character than this. But, and once again, it doesn't really matter even if they're blitzing a supersonic character, it would just be 10 times faster than them. Not real much to go into that. So at best they're 10 times supersonic pretty much, all things considered, but a lot of them are just subsonic, all things considered. Some people also try to argue that they're FTL, interstellar travel, which A, we don't know how they're achieving interstellar travel, if they even are, and B, we don't know the time frame, and especially that even if we want to say they can perform interstellar travel, nothing shows they can move at the same speeds they do in space that they do on the gravity of the planet, and there's nothing proving that they can, especially when this fight is obviously probably not gonna go take place in space. But after that, let's just go straight into the verdict. Well, the characters in Skibidi Toilet definitely have a more variety of weapons, from lasers, explosions, missiles, shields, light that kind of can control robots. And our smarter was keep Homelander at bay and confuse him, definitely keeping him on the edge of the fight. But this wouldn't matter when you just show the stat gap. Even if you want to give them their best scaling, aka the town level argumentation, with the fact that one of them has a mountain level beam, Homelander is still physically much stronger, over 1,000 times actually, considering the gap between town and city busting of powers. He would just simply slice and one-shot anyone who comes in his way. And regarding the mountain level laser, not only could he just avoid it, once again, this 15-second laser speed, I don't think Homelander's that stupid, and especially with his cockiness, he would probably just taunt him and cut down the mothership anyways, especially considering the fact that this laser has no evidence of scaling to the mothership's durability. It's just a great, huge, big, slow target for Homelander to kill. Even with their hacks, for example, he's too fast and he's too strong. We're comparing characters who cap at town level durability and mostly town level attack potency with supersonic speeds or high into supersonic speeds, maybe supersonic plus, to a character who is large town level or maybe even city level with hypersonic plus to high hypersonic speeds. He would run circles around the entire army at once before just leveling it with a single punch. Which I know it's crazy to say Homelander actually beats a character, because 99% of the time he doesn't. Don't get me wrong. Homelander still sucks as a character, and you very much can make the argument in a lot of cases that if there's a case where Homelander is slightly stronger than his opponent, the opponent can still just pull it off because Homelander is a fucking idiot at times and has no skill whatsoever. But I don't think it applies to a gap of over 1,000 times in both strength and speed. Which means, once again, to put it in perspective, Homelander, just casually using his lasers would kill any one of them before they could react. So, in conclusion, Homelander just stat diffs, despite the fact these guys do have a quite variety of attacks and are quite smart, and proves Homelander isn't the weakest in fiction. I'd argue Skibidi is definitely a contender, more so than Homelander, despite how underrated and overrated both are. Mostly overrated. But besides that, if you enjoyed today's video comparing some of the most slandered characters in fiction, please like, subscribe, and share the video, and join the Discord server linked in the description below. We host daily polls, chat about a bunch of different interesting topics, and much more. So please have a good night or day, and peace.